This girl has an extraordinary gift. Her eyes allow her to clearly see everything within a half-mile radius, even through solid objects. This unique ability gives her a major advantage in her job. Cine is a senior employee at a casino, and her role is to identify cheaters. One evening, Cine spotted a woman who had discreetly hidden a chip at the bottom of her wine glass, signaling to her partner through gestures to cheat. She also noticed a man concealing a card up his sleeve. Whenever Cine caught someone cheating, she would discreetly inform security using her radio. Suddenly, Cine saw a man in a floral shirt stealing a chip from the player beside him. Just as she was about to report him, another man in a white suit sat down next to the thief. Cine quickly realized the two were working together. Without hesitation, she called security and then walked over to the pair, pretending to engage them in conversation to buy time. In that moment, Cine discovered that the thief was actually a criminal wanted by the police, with a reward of $3,500 for his capture. She alerted security to detain the two men and, upon closer inspection, noticed that the man in the white suit was wearing a fake beard and wig, confirming he wasn't who he seemed. After leaving the room and locking them inside, Cine couldn't help but smile, thinking about the reward she was about to claim. What Cine didn't know, however, was that the man in the white suit was Cine Wu, the president of a major corporation. Cine Wu had disguised himself as a casino thief to investigate the origins of a necklace known as Tears of the Queen. This necklace had been missing for 20 years and was a birthday gift from his father to his late mother. Tragically, after receiving it, his mother had been brutally murdered, and the killer was never found. The necklace recently resurfaced at an auction, and Cine Wu went undercover to uncover who was behind its sale. Unfortunately, his cover was blown by a bodyguard, and he was forced to fight his way out. Despite being the youngest president of a leading company, Cine Wu was highly skilled in hand-to-hand combat. With a few quick moves, he took down the guards and made his way into the auction house's secret records room. However, he couldn't find any information about the seller. Just then, he heard footsteps and hid behind a cabinet, but an adorable dog found him. The playful puppy wouldn't stop jumping on him, exposing his hiding spot. Out of options, Cine Wu confronted the woman accompanying the dog and demanded to know who was selling the necklace. But as the dog's owner pretended to hug her pet, she discreetly pulled out a gun and pointed it at Cine Wu's head. What she didn't know was that Cine Wu had already discovered the gun in a drawer earlier and removed all the bullets. As the dog wagged its tail and ran to him, Cine Wu realized something was off. When the woman's subordinates arrived, they found her tied to a chair, and Cine Wu had already escaped. Cine Wu fled the auction house but couldn't find his car. With his pursuers closing in, he had no choice but to grab a pink electric scooter nearby to make his escape. Little did he know, the scooter belonged to Cine, who joined the crowd chasing after him. Using the scooter's speed, Cine Wu managed to switch lanes and get away. Afterward, he went to his best friend Jinmo, a lawyer and expert hacker. Together, they traced the seller of the Tears of the Queen necklace using the dog's collar. Cine Wu knew he had to act quickly. When he confronted the thief, who had information about the necklace, the thief demanded help escaping first. Cine Wu then contacted Jinmo to set their next plan into motion. Meanwhile, Cine stood outside, ready to call the police and make the arrest. Suddenly, she noticed a man hiding behind a pillar, looking like he was being attacked. She rushed over to help but found no one there. The man, however, seemed absolutely terrified, as if he had just seen a monster. Moments later, he began convulsing on the ground. It turned out that this entire scene was orchestrated by Jinmo to buy Cine Wu and the thief more time to escape. Jinmo pretended to faint, adding extra time to their getaway. When Cine saw him lying there unconscious, she repeatedly slapped his face, trying to wake him up. Unable to take it anymore, Jinmo snapped out of his act, mumbled a few random words, and then stood up and ran away, leaving Cine baffled and completely confused. By the time Cine realized what had happened, the two men she had caught were already gone. Using her sharp abilities, she quickly spotted them at the end of the hallway and immediately called security to block all exits. Soon, the two fugitives had no choice but to flee to the rooftop, which had weaker security. On the rooftop, Cine Wu overpowered the thief with a quick shoulder throw. The thief, writhing in pain, finally broke down and confessed that the necklace had been stolen from a woman artist's house. At that moment, Cine arrived on the scene with security guards in tow. In a desperate move, Seon-woo grabbed the thief by his jacket and pretended to prepare to throw him off the building. Panicked, the thief quickly slipped out of his jacket and begged for mercy. Seeing the thief was no longer useful, Seon-woo made a bold decision and jumped off the building himself. Sira and the guards gasped in shock, rushing to the edge to see what had happened. To their surprise, Seon-woo landed safely in a garbage truck below and made his escape. Later that day, Sira met up with her friend Nahi to vent her frustration about how the $7,000 reward she was after had slipped through her fingers. One of the thieves had gotten away, and the security captain had taken credit for catching the other one. As Nahi tried to console her, she noticed that Sira's helmet was missing. While Sira's beloved scooter had been returned, her helmet was nowhere to be found. Sira thought back and realized that the man who had sped off on her scooter was the same one who had jumped off the building and escaped. Even worse, she recalled seeing the garbage truck driver wearing her helmet. Determined to recover her $3,500 reward, Sira sprang into action. Using her keen eyesight and exceptional observational skills, she spotted the garbage truck by its license plate and followed it to the highest vantage point in the city, scanning the entire area. Soon enough, she located Seon-woo, now dressed in black, breaking into someone's house. Without hesitation, Sira called the police and kept her eyes locked on him and the blood-stained bed inside the house. Seon-woo had entered the home of the woman artist from whom the necklace had been stolen, and it was clear that a murder had taken place there. Just as Seon-woo realized something was wrong and tried to leave, the police arrived and declared him the prime suspect. Fortunately for Seon-woo, there wasn't enough time for him to have committed the crime, and there was no evidence linking him to it. He was released, but placed under a restraining order and ordered to cooperate with the investigation. The next day, after reading the news, Sira discovered that the man she had been tracking was none other than the youngest company president, Seon-woo. Feeling a mix of regret and anxiety, she worried that she might have caused unnecessary trouble for herself. Seeking advice, she rushed to Nahi to discuss her next steps. Sira debated whether she should go to the police to report the real suspect and clear Seon-woo's name, but Nahi advised her to stay out of it. Just then, Nahi received a call from the housing authority, informing her that her landlord had demanded she move out immediately, offering double the agreed compensation as a settlement. Curious, Nahi asked more questions and discovered that the landlord lived on the second floor of the building. Furious, Sira stormed upstairs to confront the landlord, only to find out that it was none other than Seon-woo himself. Hearing Sira's aggressive knocking outside, Seon-woo decided to avoid her, leaving his best friend, Jinmo, to deal with the situation instead. As soon as Sira entered the room, she started talking non-stop, asserting that even the landlord couldn't trample on their privacy rights. She argued that money wasn't the ultimate power, and that Nahi's efforts shouldn't go to waste. Just then, Seon-woo appeared, which only fueled Sira's anger. She threatened him by referencing the casino incident, noting that since the case of the suspect hadn't been resolved, his disguise being discovered would lead to even bigger problems. Sira then disclosed what she had witnessed on the night of the murder: a suspicious figure dragging a large suitcase. She suggested this could be a critical clue to help Seon-woo clear his name. After some back and forth, they reached a compromise. Seon-woo agreed not to reclaim the shop, and Sira committed to assisting him in finding the real killer and proving his innocence. When Seon-woo learned about Sira's incredible ability to see things clearly from a distance, he started formulating a plan. Sira, determined to convince him, confidently claimed that she had even seen through a wall and spotted someone pulling a suitcase away. Though skeptical, Seon-woo decided to follow her to see what she was up to. However, she led him straight into a dead end. Frustrated, Seon-woo was about to leave when Sira, determined she wasn't mistaken, carefully observed the area and noticed a security camera several hundred meters away. With the help of Jinmo, their genius hacker, they accessed the footage. Sure enough, it showed someone dragging a large suitcase in the direction Sira had described. The suspect eventually entered an alley and drove off into the city. Using the license plate captured in the footage, Jinmo quickly tracked down the suspect's information. This newfound lead made Seon-woo begin to see Sira in a new light. But rather than working with her, Seon-woo and Jinmo ditched Sira to pursue the investigation on their own. Undeterred, Sira went to a phone booth and called her brother, Gwonki, who worked at the police station, to report the clue. Just as she finished the call, Seon-woo returned. On Jinmo's advice, he realized that Sira's observational skills could save them a lot of time. he decided to officially hire her as his detective assistant, forming an unlikely trio. Their first move was to visit the manager of the murdered artist. The manager immediately recognized the man in the photo, identifying him as someone who had been stalking the artist for a while. However, the manager had no information about the stolen necklace. They then tracked down a longtime colleague of the artist, who revealed that the necklace was likely a gift from the artist's boyfriend. While he didn't know the boyfriend's identity, he did share that the couple frequently visited a nightclub in Gangnam. Following this lead, Sira and Seon-woo decided to infiltrate the club, dressing the part for the occasion. Seon-woo personally fastened an expensive necklace around Sira's neck as part of their plan. Once inside, they waited for the right opportunity to gather more clues. At the club, a girl angered a wealthy man, Tae-jun, with her words. As she begged for mercy, the indifferent crowd treated it like entertainment. Unable to stand by, Sira grabbed a bucket of ice, dumped it over Tae-jun's head, and scolded him fiercely. Her boldness unexpectedly intrigued Tae-jun, sparking his interest in her. However, things took a dark turn when Tae-jun started harassing Sira. She tried to escape, but was blocked. Realizing she was in danger, Sira quickly squatted to evade his grasp. Tae-jun, now furious, was about to lose control when Sira ran off and collided with someone. It was Seon-woo, dressed sharply in a new suit. It turned out that Jinmo, monitoring the situation, had seen Sira in trouble and alerted Seon-woo. However, with guards blocking the entrance, Seon-woo had to change his clothes and come up with a plan before he could get inside. Finally, he rushed in and swiftly rescued Sira, pulling her out of harm's way. As they walked out, Sira gazed at Seon-woo with a tender look, inching closer to him. Seon-woo grew anxious, seemingly anticipating something. But Sira broke the moment, asking what was on his mind. She had noticed someone secretly filming her, which she detected from the reflection in Seon-woo's eyes. Holding him tightly, she shared her discovery. However, after observing for a while, Seon-woo couldn't spot anything unusual. Seeing how tense Sira was, he tried to calm her down, but then ripped off the masked man's jacket, uncovering a hidden camera. The masked man tried to escape, but Sira tripped him. When they removed his mask, they realized he was the manager. The advanced equipment he carried suggested he was no stranger to this kind of behavior. Under pressure, he confessed that his boss had ordered him to secretly record compromising videos of the woman artist to blackmail her into following the company's demands. This time, his mission was to film a scandalous video of Seon-woo with the artist to coerce Seon-woo into signing unfair contracts. To gather more evidence, Seon-woo used the manager's phone to message his boss, warning him that their scheme had been exposed. As the boss read the message and tried to delete the incriminating video, Seon-woo appeared in front of him. Panicking, the boss attempted to swallow the memory card, but ended up choking on it. Seon-woo and Jinmo tried hitting his back to dislodge it, but it was no use. Sira stepped in and performed a quick first-aid maneuver, making the boss spit out the memory card with a glob of mucus. Sira picked it up and handed it to Seon-woo, who looked completely baffled. Meanwhile, Gwonki tracked the suspect's car using Sira's tips and discovered additional clues, including a gun. They promptly sent the evidence for DNA testing and arrested the suspect. At home, the trio reviewed the recovered video. It showed the woman artist wearing a bracelet from the Children's Cancer Protection Organization. Sira also spotted a Christmas tree keychain on the stalker's backpack, confirming he was present at the artist's home the night of the murder. However, Seon-woo and Jinmo couldn't see the keychain even after zooming in. Unable to explain herself, Sira awkwardly excused herself and left. Before she could go far, Seon-woo called her back, asking if she had forgotten something. Assuming he meant thanking him for rescuing her, Sira was surprised when he reminded her to return the necklace. Embarrassed, she reluctantly took it off. Watching Seon-woo carefully store it away, Sira privately scoffed, thinking rich people were oddly stingy. But when she learned the necklace was worth $68,500, she instinctively touched her neck in disbelief. When Sira got home, Nahi noticed her luxurious dress and questioned if Sira had gotten involved in a side gig, joking that the dress alone cost half a year's salary. Sira simply replied that what she experienced today was the most thrilling moment of her life. The next day, after enhancing the image, Seon-woo finally saw the Christmas tree keychain Sira had described. Both he and Jinmo began to believe Sira might have extraordinary vision. To test her abilities further, Seon-woo went to a rooftop and called her. He told her he had a gift for her, but that she needed to look toward the conglomerate building's roof. When Sira removed her glasses and clearly read the words in the distance, Seonwoo became convinced of her secret ability. To push her further, he pretended to fall off the rooftop. Sira's panicked scream confirmed that she could see his every move. Realizing how useful she could be, Seonwoo decided that having Sira as an assistant would make solving the case much easier. While Seonwoo and Jinmo were strategizing, an alarm suddenly went off. Through the surveillance camera, they saw Secretary Hong banging frantically on the door. Just as he was about to break it down, Seonwoo opened it. Settling down, they noticed Secretary Hong wearing a bracelet identical to the one the murdered artist had. The bracelet symbolized their shared love for children with cancer. Learning this, Seonwoo immediately rushed to the secret elevator that connected to the lawyer's office in the basement. Meanwhile, Jinmo found out the suspect's son was listed as a recipient of donations. This revealed the connection between the suspect and the woman artist the child. As Seonwoo was changing clothes, getting ready to investigate, he heard a commotion downstairs. It turned out Nahi's shop was running a promotion, drawing many employees from Seonwoo's company. If he went downstairs, he'd surely be recognized. Confidently, Jinmo decided to handle the situation. He tossed the bread Nahi had given him and knocked over the balloon dummy at the entrance. His attempts to resolve the chaos failed, so he resorted to welcoming guests himself. Finally, Sira stepped in to save the day. In doing so, she and Jinmo developed a closer bond. At the hospital, they noticed the police were already investigating. One of the officers was Gwanki, someone Sira regarded as a brother figure. To avoid being noticed, Sira and Seonwoo hid and eavesdropped. A nurse mentioned the suspect's son had been discharged and described the suspect as kind and warm outwardly, though he secretly mistreated his son. Although authorities had been alerted about this, the boy was too young to escape his father. At the same time, Ara received news of a search warrant, prompting them to head to the suspect's house. After the police left, Seonwoo and Sira examined a hospital photo showing the woman artist holding the suspect's son. The artist, known for taking revenge when wronged, had allowed the suspect to harass her for a long time, hinting at a hidden connection between them. Meanwhile, the police discovered the suspect was a drug addict who used his child's aid money to fund his habit. Without funds, he turned to the woman artist. Neighbors revealed he was a violent abuser, so much so that his wife had fled and never returned. Gwanki noticed something in the corner of the suspect's room. Under a blanket, he found a large blood stain, explaining why the wife had left. To gather more information, Jinmo arranged for Sira to be admitted to the hospital. However, Seonwoo and Sira were mistaken as newlyweds by other patients. To avoid suspicion, Seonwoo played along, admitting they were married. Later, the nurse announced Sira's checkup, and Seonwoo helped her out, gently guiding her. While they were gone, a phone on the hospital bed rang. When Nahi learned Sira was visiting a cardiologist, she rushed to the hospital. Seonwoo, meanwhile, continued gathering intelligence. However, to their elderly roommate, Seonwoo's actions made him appear unfaithful. Seonwoo asked the head nurse about her shift on June 8th, the day of the incident. Although surprised, the nurse retrieved the work schedule and confirmed she was on night duty that day. Seonwoo thanked her for her efforts and left, instructing Jinmo via headset to investigate the whereabouts of all pediatric nurses from that night. The head nurse overheard this conversation. After Sira's checkup, the elderly roommate stopped her, claiming she had something important to share as a fellow woman. Without further explanation, she pulled Sira aside. Meanwhile, Jinmo, monitoring the situation from his car, heard screeching brakes. Spotting Nahi, visibly angry, Jinmo chased her down, yelling for her to stop. When he caught up, he held her as if about to confess his feelings. The elderly roommate, believing the restroom was private, confided in Sira, urging her to discipline her husband. She revealed that Han's father, in the adjacent pediatric room, had an affair with Nurse Shim. Sira recalled the connection between Nurse Shim and the case just as Jinmo's scream came through her headset. Nahi had arrived at the hospital, worried about Sira. Jinmo tried stalling her, but Nahi remained concerned. She pointed out that Sira, even with a fever of 101 degrees Fahrenheit, wouldn't visit a cardiologist without good reason. She accused Seonwoo and Jinmo of causing this. Frustrated, Jinmo downed the coffee he'd bought for her to calm himself. Unable to take it anymore, Nahi stormed off, leaving Jinmo to collapse on the ground. Meanwhile, Seonwoo and Sira were about to call Jinmo, but couldn't get through. Just then, Nahi called Sira to inform her that Jinmo had been taken to the emergency room. When Sira arrived, Nahi hadn't even had a chance to ask questions before being caught off guard. Xianwu asked Nahi if she had given Jinmo milk. Nahi lied, saying Jinmo drank it on his own and wondered how she was supposed to know he was severely allergic to milk. Xianwu then asked Sira why she had suddenly experienced such intense chest pain that she needed to be hospitalized. Once it was clear Sira was fine, Nahi finally agreed to head home. Initially, Xianwu planned to go home and sleep, but he was reminded by his elderly roommate to close the curtains. He ended up competing with Sira for a spot to sleep. The next morning, when the old lady roommate opened the curtains, she saw something shocking. Xianwu was lying on the bed, complaining about how hard it was, while his sick wife Sira was on the folding bed. Outraged, the old lady immediately scolded Xianwu. He quickly woke Sira, telling her to get up, but the old man roommate yelled at him to help his wife instead. At that moment, the old man brought out breakfast, visibly disgusted. This time, Xianwu was smarter. He copied others, lifted the table, and placed the food down. Yet, the old lady roommate continued to criticize him. Sira, wanting to take advantage of the situation and teach Xianwu a lesson, pretended her wrist was numb. Just as she expected, the old man told Xianwu to feed her. With no other choice, Xianwu reluctantly complied. To make it worse, Sira said she wanted meat. Xianwu glanced across the table and fed her a piece of beef. After some effort, he finally managed to feed her. As he stepped out of the room, he saw Secretary Hong watching him. Terrified, Xianwu ran, but Hong chased him, ignoring his injured foot. When Xianwu spotted Sira, it was like seeing a savior. He ran to her, nearly making her faint from shock. He quickly covered her mouth, grabbed her hand, and dragged her away. Luckily, they managed to escape from Secretary Hong. Later, the three discussed Nurse Shim, who the old lady mentioned, and agreed she seemed suspicious. However, they discovered that Nurse Shim worked as a Latin dance instructor and had a class on the night of the incident, giving her a solid alibi. Unsure of their next move, Sira noticed a nurse's pen with a keychain that matched the suspect's backpack. They learned it belonged to the head nurse. Xianwu asked if the head nurse was on duty on June 8th. A nurse mentioned she left work 2 hours early. It became clear the head nurse had lied, giving her time to reach the crime scene. They realized they'd been chasing the wrong person. The real suspect was the head nurse. Meanwhile, Jinmo found the suitcase the suspect had taken that night in the head nurse's car trunk. He also tracked her frequent locations using her car's navigation system. The head nurse, now changing her clothes to leave work, made a careful phone call. Sira used her sharp memory to note the phone number. After she left, they called the number. Hearing just one sentence, Xianwu's eyes widened, and he quickly hung up. At that moment, the head nurse noticed them, turned around, and ran. A chase began, but with so many patients and unfamiliar paths, they lost her. Fortunately, Sira's sharp eyesight spotted the head nurse despite her removing her coat and wearing a hat. Reporting her location to Xianwu, Sira trailed her into a storage room. As soon as she walked in, the head nurse injected Sira with an anesthetic, causing her to collapse immediately. Xianwu, having been informed, rushed to the scene. Spotting a fallen earpiece on the ground, he realized something had happened to Sira. He cautiously approached and saw the stock room door slowly closing. Upon entering, he found Sira unconscious. Just as he stepped closer, the head nurse attacked him with a steel pipe. Xianwu managed to overpower her, but she unexpectedly struck him with an anesthetic dose. Meanwhile, Jinmo, waiting in the car, became restless. Seeing the head nurse driving off, he was torn should he chase her or rescue Xianwu and Sira. When Xianwu and Sira came to, they discovered their hands and feet were tied with fur tubing. The more they struggled, the tighter the bindings became. Xianwu devised a plan. They could only use their mouths to escape. While Sira thought they should call for help, Xianwu suggested they try untying the knots with their teeth. With no other option, Sira agreed, but Xianwu found it too ticklish to bear and failed. He even blamed Sira for being unhelpful. When Jinmo finally arrived at the location Sira had described, he heard strange noises from the room. Cautiously opening the door, he was stunned by what he saw. Apologizing for the intrusion, he closed the door, leaving the two inside fuming in frustration. Luckily, Jinmo was only joking. After freeing them, the trio went straight to the head nurse's frequent address. On the way, Jinmo theorized that the head nurse had partnered with the suspect to murder the female artist for money. Xianwu, however, disagreed, believing the artist was still alive based on the voice he had heard over the phone. Suddenly, a white car approached. Seon-woo jerked the steering wheel, nearly causing a collision. Jinmo asked what he was doing, but Seon-woo said nothing and exited the car. It turned out this was the head nurse's vehicle. Opening the back door, Seon-woo found the female artist sitting inside. It was revealed that she had become pregnant after her involvement with Tae-jun. She was willing to sacrifice her career for her child, but Tae-jun bribed the head nurse to lie, telling her the baby had died at birth. For 7 years, the artist volunteered at the hospital, caring for sick children. One day, she met Han, feeling a deep familiarity, as if they'd known each other before. The head nurse, who had deceived her, also appeared, and the artist realized the truth about her child. Seeing the scars her foster father had left on Han, she swore to make Tae-jun pay. Tae-jun had tricked her, and she sneaked into his house to steal the tears of the queen necklace, believing it was his weakness. Within 2 days, the necklace was stolen again. Thinking Tae-jun had taken it back, she didn't go to the police. However, after nearly being struck by a falling stage light and receiving a threat from Tae-jun demanding the necklace's return, she realized someone else had stolen it. Afraid Tae-jun would find out, she staged a fake crime scene. With the head nurse's help, she spilled fake blood, dragged a suitcase, and used her foster father's car to create the illusion of a murder. The woman artist's plan wasn't just to take down Tae-jun. She also sought revenge on her son's foster father. However, when Seon-woo arrived at the house, he immediately recognized that the crime scene had been intentionally staged. He also noticed trophies on the table. Seon-woo was investigating this case because he needed to find out the origin of the necklace, which was connected to his mother's death 20 years ago. The woman artist, however, asked him to let her go first, promising to reveal the truth after her son's surgery. She explained that if they delayed any longer, the plane would leave, and if they missed that flight, Huck's surgery would be cancelled. Seeing how determined and strong the child was, Sira's heart broke, and she urged Seon-woo not to ask more questions. But since the necklace that belonged to his mother had resurfaced after 20 years, Seon-woo couldn't walk away from it. Just then, they heard a car. Seon-woo opened the door to find the woman artist had escaped, and Jinmo had been injected with anesthetic. While waiting for Jinmo to wake up, Seon-woo examined the paintings on the wall. When Jinmo finally regained consciousness, Seon-woo urged him to quickly locate the woman artist's car. It turned out they had secretly placed a tracker on it before entering. The three of them then followed the signal to the hospital. The child looked exhausted, but still insisted on being fine and determined to board the plane. Just as they were about to leave, Seon-woo's group entered. The woman artist was almost completely broken, asking him why he had to push her so far. Seon-woo reminded her that if she didn't keep her promise, he would find her and her son, no matter where they went. He also made it clear that he was doing this for Han's sake. Seon-woo mentioned that his private helicopter would arrive at the airport in an hour. Han said goodbye to Seon-woo, and as Sira and Jinmo exchanged smiles, the woman artist leaned in to whisper a clue in Seon-woo's ear. The mission was complete, and Sira was no longer responsible. Seon-woo asked her to sign a confidentiality agreement, but she walked away without looking back. Both Seon-woo and Jinmo thought Sira was angry, but in reality, she felt uncomfortable because she had misunderstood Seon-woo. She thought he was a creep, but in truth, he was just investigating his mother's case. Sira suddenly remembered the home dress she wore to the bar. They had agreed that after the mission, the dress would be hers. However, when she turned back, she noticed the car door was locked. Sira went to look for Jinmo, but found no one. When she opened the door, she walked straight in and stared at the wall full of books, unable to believe her eyes. She accidentally touched a book, and the wall suddenly moved. Sira was drawn into a basement filled with high-tech equipment. As her eyes landed on some photos on the table, her steps came to a halt. At that moment, Seon-woo was unaware that a woman had entered his secret room. After exercising and heading to the living room, he glanced at the dress on the table. Curious, Seon-woo decided to try it on, thinking of the time Sira had worn it. Just as he was about to, a laugh interrupted him. Once Sira was seen by Seon-woo, she had no choice but to step out. Fortunately, Jinmo arrived just in time, taking off his jacket and handing it to Seon-woo to ease the awkwardness. After regaining his composure, Seon-woo warned Sira not to tell anyone about what had just happened. Sira promised she wouldn't speak a word and left with the dress. Jinmo then told Seon-woo that Sira now knew all of his secrets, including his body. Later, After turning back in the room, Sira suddenly remembered the painting Seon-woo had given her. She immediately sent an anonymous photo to the police, which led them to a location that matched the one in the painting. After digging a bit, the police uncovered the body of a woman wrapped in cloth. With such clear evidence, the suspect had no way to deny his involvement. While the woman artist's case had nothing to do with him, he had still murdered his wife. Meanwhile, Sira lay awake in bed, unable to sleep. The woman she had seen earlier at Seon-woo's base looked eerily familiar, like someone from her childhood. It seemed she had finally come to harm, but beyond that, Sira couldn't recall anything else. The next morning, Sira happily took the money she earned from selling the dress and went to meet Nahi. However, she unexpectedly ran into Gwanki, who was there to take more statements. Taking advantage of the moment, Sira asked him about her memory loss. Gwanki revealed that when Sira was very young, she nearly lost her life because of her powers, which caused her memory issues. However, he was hesitant to share more details and repeatedly warned her not to use her powers again to avoid danger. Meanwhile, Seon-woo was alone at the base, reflecting on the warning the woman artist had whispered to him, telling him to be cautious of Taejun. It reminded him of their last encounter at the nightclub, where Taejun's reaction to Sira's necklace made him suspect that it was somehow connected to him. After Jinmo had just finished taking care of a middle school girl, he headed down to the base. The two discussed their plans and emphasized the need to investigate Taejun thoroughly. Jinmo suggested that Sira should follow the suspect. Initially, Seon-woo thought it was too dangerous and disagreed, but after some persuasion, he reluctantly agreed. That night, Seon-woo called Sira, trying to suppress his feelings as he invited her to work with him the next day. Sira was thrilled, but kept her composure. She asked why he had said he didn't need her before. Seon-woo replied that now she had become necessary, but not to the point that he couldn't manage without her. Sira pressed him, asking if he was sure he didn't really need her. Seon-woo finally admitted that this time, it had to be her. Sira's smile brightened, genuinely pleased. The next day, both Jinmo and Seon-woo were at the office, but Sira was nowhere to be found. Seon-woo was shocked that she had dared to hang up on him. Jinmo checked his screen and saw that Sira had disappeared. They quickly went downstairs to ask Nahi, who informed them that a girl named Swa had called Sira. Jinmo suddenly remembered that the girl he had met the day before was also named Swa. The two then drove to the orphanage where Swa lived. It was there that Seon-woo discovered that Sira had also come from this place. Swa worked hard to support her siblings at the orphanage. The director mentioned that Swa had taken her savings book and left that morning. They found suspicious pills in the trash and saw a photo of Swa with another girl, suggesting the issue was connected to her. Meanwhile, Sira spotted Swa outside the convenience store where she worked. Just as Sira began to feel relieved, she saw Swa being taken away by some thugs. She immediately called the police, but there was no answer. Confused and anxious, the sound of car brakes filled the air. Seon-woo had arrived just in time. He told Sira to get in the car, and together they chased after the thugs. Despite their best efforts, they couldn't catch up. Luckily, Sira's tracking skills helped them follow the car's direction. Eventually, they found it parked on elevated land. Sira rushed to open the door to save Swa, but Seon-woo stopped her, explaining that there were too many people inside, and they wouldn't stand a chance if they charged in. They would likely end up caught, along with Swa. As they discussed their plan, Swa was taken to an abandoned factory. It turned out that her best friend was in debt because of drug addiction, and the thugs were using Swa to settle the debt. Swa watched in anguish as her friend lay unconscious, and then she handed over all her money to the gangsters, begging them to release her friend and let them both go. Unexpectedly, the thugs refused and even wanted to keep Swa. They looked her up and down with lewd expressions and smugly told her they would introduce her to a job that paid well. Swa, feeling disgusted, threatened them, saying her brother was a cop. One thug slapped her across the face and then tied her up. Just then, a sudden knock at the door interrupted the scene, urging everyone inside to come out for food. The thugs exchanged confused glances, as no one had ordered anything, but the person outside insisted the address was correct. The two thugs opened the door to find Seon-woo standing there in a helmet. He signaled to Sira, and together, they entered. The thugs began to inspect the contents of the bag Seon-woo had brought, but when they opened it, they were taken aback. Before they could react, Seon-woo swiftly took them down. He activated smoke bombs from the bag to obscure the remaining gangsters' vision and with a few quick moves, he neutralized the entire gang effortlessly. Meanwhile, Sierra slipped in through the back door to rescue Swa. As she reached the bed where the girl lay, one of the thugs lunged at her, taking Swa hostage and pressing a knife to her throat. Cine had no choice but to surrender, unable to help. Inside the warehouse, both Cine and Sierra were bound together. The thugs believed Swa was just an orphan, thinking no one would come looking for her, but they hadn't anticipated the trouble they would cause. Cine warned the thugs to release him before things escalated further, and told them that if they had the guts, they should make something bigger of it. He scoffed at the idea of kidnapping a child. The thug, enraged, punched Cine in the stomach. Cine laughed bitterly, never imagining that a chairman like him would be beaten by thugs. Just as the thug was about to punch him again, the alarm blared, and the door opened. Jinmo, wearing a tactical combat uniform, entered, raising his submachine gun. The gangsters panicked and fled, but not before grabbing the two girls. Jinmo shouted for everyone to stay put, but when he looked up, he saw only Sierra and Cine. The thugs had escaped, and when they realized they had been tricked, they fled in their black car, leaving Jinmo's keys behind. Sierra, visibly distressed after seeing her sister being kidnapped, rushed after the car. Cine, worried about what might happen to her, chased after her. In their pursuit, they accidentally left Jinmo behind. Sierra ran up the mountain and used her powers of supervision to locate the black car, but the high-intensity use of her power only lasted 10 seconds, causing her head to ache violently. Despite the pain, she pressed on and managed to spot the car's license plate. Just as she was about to collapse, Cine caught her to prevent her from being hit by the car, carefully cradling her head. In the moments before she passed out, Sierra saw Cine face, and the memory of that night flashed in her mind. When Sierra came to, she found Swa and her friend had been tortured. Fortunately, the law would soon punish those responsible. At the hospital, unable to sleep, Sierra replayed the events in her mind. Now that Swa had been found, the next step was to investigate the origins of Cine mother's necklace. The necklace, which had mysteriously disappeared the night Cine mother was killed, had resurfaced after 20 years. By following the trail, they were hopeful that they would uncover the truth about the murder. The next day, Sierra dressed in formal attire, ready to work as Taejun's secretary, as arranged by Cine. Cine was suspicious because the necklace had been taken from Taejun's safe, and Taejun had consistently sent people to search for the person wearing it. Cine believed, however, that the most dangerous place could also be the safest. On top of that, Taejun was so intoxicated that he wouldn't be able to clearly recognize or remember Sierra's face. Cine trusted that Taejun wouldn't recognize her. Sierra managed to find the perfect spot to place the camera just as Taejun entered. She introduced herself as the new secretary and quickly tried to leave to start her work. However, Taejun called her back. Just as Sierra feared she'd been exposed, he told her to put away the cleaning rag. She hastily picked it up and dashed out, completing the mission flawlessly without revealing any flaws. As she was celebrating her success, a phone call came through for Taejun. She immediately connected it to the inside phone. While she was thinking that being a secretary was her true calling, Taejun stormed out, angrily scolding her. He asked if she was crazy, constantly connecting him to the inside phone whenever he called. Sierra, flustered from the reprimand, was told to prepare the materials for an upcoming meeting. Meanwhile, Cine observed Sierra working hard and fell into deep thought. During the meeting, Taejun wore sunglasses to conceal the fact that he was nodding off. When the chairman entered, everyone stood up to greet him, but Taejun stayed fast asleep, completely unaware of the situation. Sierra quickly nudged him awake and used colored pens to take notes during the meeting. After Taejun glanced over her notes, he started speaking seriously, unaware that everyone saw him as a fool. Sierra swiftly swapped his documents with another one, causing Taejun to become angry with her for not being properly prepared. Secretary Kim quickly intervened to defend Sierra. Cine scolded Taejun for being the chairperson of the meeting without understanding the content and for taking out his frustration on his subordinate. Taejun felt embarrassed in front of everyone and immediately decided to fire Sierra. However, Secretary Kim opposed the decision, prompting Cine to realize that Taejun was genuinely listening to him. Curious about the reason behind this, Cine had Jinmo install a tracking device in Taejun's car. That evening, Cine followed Taejun to a fancy bar, bribed the server, and placed a listening device under a fruit plate. Seonwoo overheard Taejun asking to take a photo with his friends, with Sira included in the picture. While it wasn't very clear, it was enough to raise Taejun's suspicions. Seonwoo was about to leave, but was blocked by a woman who irritated him. Taejun spotted him, growing suspicious that he was being followed. Seonwoo told him not to overthink it and sat down seriously, waiting for someone. Unexpectedly, Taejun also sat down, curious to see how long Seonwoo's lies would last. Seonwoo had no choice but to call Secretary Hong, but when Hong's voice suddenly came from behind, both men turned around to see him leading a group of employees out for dinner, waving cheerfully. Seonwoo quickly waved back, pretending it was all a legitimate reason for being there. Taejun was confused, unable to believe Seonwoo had plans with the secretarial team. The staff was excited to be invited to dinner by both the chairman and the director. One of the secretaries even became giddy at the sight of Secretary Kim. Once seated, Seonwoo texted Sira, urging her to leave quickly, but Taejun wouldn't let her go. He pulled her closer, insisting she stay. With no other choice, Sira had to go along with the group. As she downed drink after drink, the secretary began spilling their feelings. The next day, after work, Taejun was referred to as the madman by the staff, as his usual behavior made him quite unpopular. Someone even confessed their love to Secretary Kim passionately, but he remained silent, looking disgusted. When Sira found herself in an awkward situation, Secretary Kim stepped in to help. While this dinner was challenging for Sira, it wasn't dangerous. Just as she worried about how to pay for a taxi, Secretary Kim kindly offered to drive her home. Seonwoo, waiting by the roadside, was so jealous that he couldn't speak. When Sira refused, he finally relaxed but, unable to swallow his pride, didn't invite her to ride with him. Watching her stumble forward, Seonwoo convinced himself she could manage on her own and sped off. However, after a short distance, he realized Sira had disappeared. He quickly got out of the car and searched for her, convincing himself that his concern was only because she was his employee. When he found her sitting at the bus stop, he thought he had worried too much. But just then, Sira felt nauseous. Seonwoo moved to help her, but she managed to hold it back. With no other choice, Seonwoo carried her on his back, though her hands started to wander again. Meanwhile, Jinmo wasn't idle. He took to the dance floor with unique moves, dancing with Nahi. Meanwhile, on the other side, Seonwoo finally managed to get Sira home. He was so exhausted that he could barely lay down, but suddenly, Sira sat up and stared at his face. She was so drunk that she mistook him for Nahi, mumbling about how strange it was that Nahi looked like Seonwoo today. Seonwoo, both annoyed and amused, still covered her with a blanket before leaving, feeling relieved. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Sira instinctively got up to answer it, but Seonwoo stopped her, and they both ended up falling onto the bed together. The next morning, Jinmo woke up in an unfamiliar bed, immediately realizing he was naked. He then remembered that, after dancing at the nightclub the night before, he had gone drinking with his beautiful neighbor, Nahi. At that moment, the sound of a toilet flushing came from the bathroom, and Nahi stepped out, seeing Jinmo in an awkward state. Jinmo recalled everything from the previous night. After getting drunk, they had slept together. Nahi pretended to make a call, saying she had to go back to her shop, and left first. However, once she stepped outside, she couldn't keep pretending anymore. Nahi regretted it deeply. After changing his clothes, Jinmo tried to sneak out while Nahi wasn't looking, but unfortunately, she caught him. He was embarrassed and awkwardly explained that he had just gone for a jog. Jinmo felt the need to explain what had happened the night before, but just then, a man walked in asking for bread. Jinmo took the opportunity to slip out unnoticed, completely panicked and unsure of what to do. That evening, when he returned, Jinmo saw the man from earlier causing trouble with Nahi. The man claimed he had swallowed a steel wire that was in one of Nahi's cakes and demanded compensation. However, there was no way a steel wire could have been in the cake, as the bakery didn't use anything like that. The man insisted it was there, and threatened to sue if he wasn't compensated. Jinmo confidently stepped forward, handed over his business card, and introduced himself as Nahi's personal lawyer. He then asked the man where he was injured. The man initially shouted that the steel wire had scratched his mouth, but Jinmo calmly pointed out that spreading false information to intimidate others could lead to a fine of at least $10,000 or imprisonment for no less than 5 years. Hearing this, the man immediately became terrified. He then said he would try applying some ointment and might not need to return if it healed. Nahi had always been strong, but for the first time, she felt a sense of security from Jinmo. That night, the three of them began investigating Taejun, with their mission to find his contacts and destroy their partnership. Sira deliberately approached Taejun, even stepping hard on Seon-woo's foot to make it more believable, all in an attempt to win Taejun's trust. Using her ability, she figured out the password to his phone. While Taejun enjoyed watching Seon-woo struggle with his secretary, he was pleased with the situation and immediately decided to invite Sira to lunch. Sira deliberately used her chopsticks to mess up the food, causing oil to splatter on Taejun. She quickly apologized and offered to go get a spare shirt for him. When she opened the car door to get the shirt, she saw someone's foot on it. Sira hurriedly pulled Seon-woo aside, and he handed her a USB, instructing her to copy data from Taejun's phone. If she didn't, he would trample her feet as revenge for what happened earlier that morning. Sira could only mutter curses under her breath at Seon-woo. When she returned, she saw Taejun's phone on the table, as he was still in the restroom dealing with his shirt. Sira saw her chance and plugged in the Type-C connector without thinking twice. She successfully entered the phone's password, which she had memorized earlier by using her super sight on Taejun's eyes that morning. Meanwhile, Seon-woo and Jinmo were already connected on their end, starting the data transfer process. As time passed, the tension among the three grew, especially for Sira. She feared what would happen if Taejun discovered what she had done, and her anxiety made her constantly glance toward the door. Just then, Seon-woo warned her that Taejun was coming out of the restroom. The moment Taejun opened the door, Sira quickly placed a box over the phone to buy them a little more time to finish the transfer. Once she heard the data copying was complete, Sira casually lifted the box, unplugged the connector, and returned to her seat, showing no signs of nervousness. Simultaneously, she let out a quiet sigh of relief. At that moment, Taejun commented that he felt like they had met somewhere before. Sira calmly responded, saying that someone of her status could never have crossed paths with someone like him, and joked that she had a mass face. With that, she successfully deceived Taejun once again. Meanwhile, Jinmo went over the data and uncovered a message that revealed Taejun had scheduled a meeting with someone named Seung-dae in the Chongrong room. However, the phone number used was from overseas, so they couldn't track it. Taejun glanced at the time and, realizing his appointment was imminent, told Sira to leave early. At this point, Jinmo also discovered Seung-dae's identity. He was a highly respected genius R&D employee in the industry, and his real name was Chizin. No matter what Taejun's plan was, they needed to stop that meeting and seize the opportunity to strike at him. When Sira returned, the three of them disguised themselves as Chinese patrons and entered the restaurant to carry out their plan. Seon-woo posed as Taejun and went in to meet Chizin, while Sira pretended to be a receptionist, escorting the real Chizin into a fake Chongrong room. Meanwhile, in the actual Chongrong room, Taejun sat across from Jinmo, who was disguised as Chizin. Jinmo handed over a pre-prepared business card, claiming to be from a special surveillance unit at H Corporation, and lied that Chizin had been found to have secret contacts with China and was under investigation. Chizin looked at Seon-woo with a confused expression, asking where Taejun was. Seon-woo used the same tactic, explaining that Taejun was under investigation and that if Chizin stopped now, Seon-woo wouldn't pursue the matter further. On the other side, Taejun angrily tossed aside the business card and began to leave. Chizin, fearing exposure, gave a vague response and tried to run, but Seon-woo stopped him. Seon-woo told him that from now on, he was not to contact Taejun anymore and warned him not to mention the incident to him. Chizin quickly agreed, and Seon-woo assured him that nothing bad would happen. But if the matter got out, it could damage the company's reputation. After successfully completing the mission, the three of them were in high spirits, unaware that Secretary Kim had secretly captured the entire scene in photographs. The next day, Sira received a more challenging mission to ruin Chairman Seon-woo's blind date. The objective was to make a woman who was both wealthy and beautiful jealous in front of Yumin. Seon-woo and Sira held hands and acted affectionate, causing Yumin to fume with jealousy. Sira even played cute and asked Seon-woo to feed her a piece of cake. After Seon-woo fed her, he ate the remaining piece, which pushed Yumin over the edge. Furious, she stood up and stormed off. Once Yumin left, Seon-woo and Sira quickly released each other's hands. However, Sira spotted Secretary Hong nearby, so Seon-woo swiftly came up with a plan. He declared that Sira was his girlfriend, ensuring that no one would pressure him into going on blind dates anymore. He then put a pair of glasses on Sira and took her to the top floor room to reward her for her convincing performance. Sian-woo ordered Sira's favorite dish, spicy rice cakes. Sian-woo had never tried them before, so he was curious about what made them so delicious that Sira was devouring them so eagerly. Sira playfully held a piece of rice cake up to his mouth, but just as Sian-woo mustered the courage to eat it, she mischievously turned the chopsticks around and ate it herself. After the meal, Sira fell asleep, leaving Sian-woo feeling helpless as he watched the carefree woman. She nearly rolled off the couch in her sleep, so Sian-woo had to pick her up and lay her on his large bed. He resigned himself to sleeping on the couch with just a pillow to keep him company. The next morning, Sian-woo was jolted awake by a phone call. He quickly realized that he was no longer on the couch, but instead lying in bed. Meanwhile, Sira, groggy from sleep, reached out for her phone. Suddenly, she felt an arm next to her. When she opened her eyes, she realized she was nestled in Sian-woo's arms. She was so startled that she screamed and jumped out of bed. Only when she saw she was still dressed and Sian-woo reassured her that nothing had happened did she begin to feel relieved. Sira quickly checked her phone and realized she was about to be late for work. However, Sian-woo reassured her not to worry, telling her to stay calm because he would take her to work through a secret passage. After both of them changed into appropriate attire, they entered a hidden underground room. The awkwardness from the previous night hung in the air as they moved through the passage, which led directly to the chairman's office. As soon as Sira left, Sian-woo turned around and was startled to find Secretary Hong standing right behind him. Secretary Hong asked if Sian-woo had been out with a woman the night before. Sian-woo didn't deny it and confirmed that the situation was exactly as Secretary Hong had assumed. Sian-woo then asked why Secretary Hong had called so early, and he explained that a strange post had appeared on the chairman's office network. However, they couldn't reach Manager Kong because he wasn't answering his phone. Sian-woo checked the security cameras and saw that after Manager Kong entered the company this morning, he hadn't been seen leaving, indicating he was still inside the building. Meanwhile, Tae-jun began to suspect Sira's identity. He had a nagging feeling he'd seen her somewhere before. After comparing photos, he finally realized that Sira was the woman who had splashed water on him. Determined to confront Sira, he rushed to the company, but by the time he reached the turn, Sira had already disappeared. Tae-jun tried to stop a cleaning staff member, unaware that it was actually Sian-woo in disguise. Knowing that Tae-jun had figured out Sira's identity, Sian-woo acted quickly. Once inside the restroom, Sian-woo led Sira out, and she complained about hiding in the storage container, saying the smell made it hard to breathe. Sian-woo remarked that while it smelled heavenly when eating, it felt like hell when hiding. Looking down, Sira noticed a truck filled with durians. Sian-woo quickly grabbed a set of cleaning staff uniforms and told Sira to put one on. Their next mission was to find the missing Manager Kong. After changing, they pushed the cart outside, but the cleaning team leader stopped them and asked where they were coming from. Luckily, Sira quickly thought on her feet and claimed they were filling in for Mr. Young and that Sian-woo was the new guy. However, the team leader stopped them from using the elevator, saying other employees didn't like cleaning staff using it because of the unpleasant smell. Sian-woo ended up having to carry the trash cart up the stairs, grumbling about the company's hierarchy, ironically, as he was the one who had been so busy playing detective that he had neglected his own duties. They finally made it to the 12th floor. Using their cleaning staff disguises, they discreetly searched Manager Kang's desk for clues. Sian-woo found a project Manager Kong had printed a few days ago. However, the document was written by an employee named Ji-hun, and the original didn't have Kang's signature. Sian-woo took a photo of it for evidence. He then pretended to be emptying the trash while plugging a USB drive into the computer to copy the data for Jinmo. Meanwhile, Sira noticed a female employee, Lee Yan, holding a flyer about sleep therapy. Sian-woo also found Manager Kang's broken fountain pen in the trash. Just as he was starting to piece things together, Sira reminded him that Tae-jun's secretary was nearby. Fearing they would be recognized, the two quickly turned around and pushed the cart out. They went to the meeting room to share the information they had gathered. Sira used her super sight and discovered a strange powder on the coffee cup, suggesting that someone had likely slipped a sedative into it and kidnapped Manager Kong. Sian-woo immediately became anxious and asked if Sira had just used her superpower again. He kept asking whether she felt uncomfortable. Sira quickly changed the subject, mentioning that she had noticed Lee Yan was sleeping poorly and wondered if the powder could be a sleeping drug. At that moment, Jinmo made a discovery. Most of the documents on the computer had been written by Ji-hun, but when they were submitted, Manager Kong had changed them to his own name. It seemed like Ji-hun had dedicated herself to the company. So why was Manager Kang's broken pen found in Li Yan's trash? Sierra suspected that the two women might be working together to commit a crime. Cine cautioned that they couldn't jump to conclusions just yet and needed to confirm a few more details. While the three of them were joking around and laughing, the cleaning team leader approached them. Sierra signaled to Cine to get back to work quickly. Cine, distracted, just stood there. When he saw the cleaning team leader, he panicked and pretended to be busy. But the team leader just calmly told them to go clean the men's restroom. Cine was stunned, but Sierra happily agreed. Unable to take it any longer, Cine tried to leave, but Sierra pulled him back. Just then, a calm-looking man stepped out. Cine nearly lost it when the door opened, a haunting fear settling in that had stayed with him ever since Sierra had hidden in the trash can. Meanwhile, Tae-jun had been relentlessly searching for Sierra. Suddenly, one scene caught his attention. When he zoomed in, he saw it was indeed Sierra, disguised as a janitor. At that moment, Sierra overheard some female employees chatting in the break room. It turned out that Manager Kong often caused trouble for the female staff, humiliating others with that pen. Finally, Sierra understood Li Yan's motive. Just as she was about to report her findings to Cine, Tae-jun approached and tried to catch her. Sierra ran, but Tae-jun chased after her and wouldn't let her go. Cine told her to run quickly into the women's restroom, but unexpectedly, Tae-jun, like a creep, barged in after her. Sierra was about to close the door when he blocked it. Luckily, Cine arrived just in time and knocked Tae-jun unconscious with one punch. Sierra worriedly asked if hitting Tae-jun like that would cost him his life, but Cine assured her it was just a gentle touch. After that, the two locked Tae-jun in the restroom. However, as they stepped outside, they ran into Cine's personal secretary, Secretary Hong, who looked upset. He said, "Every day, I make sure the chairman's hands are spotless, so why does the chairman now have to do cleaning?" Cine quickly changed the subject and asked Secretary Hong if there had been any recent complaints about Manager Kong. Hong replied that there hadn't been any. But he mentioned that 2 months ago, Manager Kong had requested an investigation into department head Ha-jin. Now, the department head had resigned. While Secretary Hong was still fretting over Cine-woo's body odor, Cine-woo quickly assigned him the task of taking care of the garbage cart. After that, Cine-woo left with Sierra as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, Tae-jun had finally escaped from the women's restroom, but he was met with bad news from Secretary Kim. President Cine-woo had actually found Manager Kong, who accused Tae-jun. It turned out that Cine-woo and Sierra had investigated the entire disappearance. The department head, Ha-jin, who had resigned 2 months ago, had spiked everyone's coffee with sleeping pills, then locked Manager Kong in a box and transported him to this location. Manager Kong was likely still asleep in the box. Thanks to the cleaning team leader's story, Cine-woo was able to put everything together. Last night, when Manager Young was helping to move the screen, he got injured. Department head Ha-jin took the opportunity to push the cleaning cart over. Afterward, she hid inside the storage container, looking for a chance to secretly post articles reporting internal news. The TV had also been moved there by department head Ha-jin. She later confessed to everything, claiming sole responsibility and stating that no one else was involved. She said she had been forced to resign due to false accusations from Manager Kong, and that's why she hated him. After accidentally overhearing a phone call between Manager Kong and Tae-jun, Ha-jin learned that Manager Kong had information about Tae-jun's corruption. This revelation led her to take action by eliminating both of them. She used Manager Kang's identity to post an internal accusation, which not only created a rift between the two, but also had the potential to expose their wrongdoings. At 1 a.m., Ha-jin published the article, helping Ji-hun and Lee Jae avoid suspicion. As the former department head, she had witnessed Manager Kong taking credit for Ji-hoon's work and frequently insulting and harassing Lee Jan. Although she had lacked the courage to stand up for them, the guilt weighed heavily on her. Cine-woo summoned the two victims, Ji-hoon and Lee Jan, and sincerely apologized to them, promising to seek justice. Ha-jin then led everyone in the search for Manager Kong, who was still inside the cardboard box. After stretching comfortably, he saw Cine-woo standing before him. He attempted to stand quickly to greet him, but hit his head on the wooden board. Cine-woo directly demanded that Manager Kong provide evidence of Tae-jun's corruption. Meanwhile, Tae-jun found Sierra and planned to question her, but Seonwoo arrived just in time to intervene. He quickly called Taejun away, allowing Sira to escape. Seonwoo revealed that Sira was under his protection and asked Taejun how he came to possess the necklace. Confused, Taejun claimed he didn't know how he had obtained it. In that moment, Seonwoo realized the necklace didn't belong to Taejun, but to his father, the vice chairman. Manager Kong was taken by the police, and Secretary Kim returned to inform Taejun's father that his son's corruption had been uncovered by Seonwoo. Furious, Taejun's father demanded that Secretary Kim call an emergency meeting. The vice chairman, aware that Seonwoo was investigating the necklace, hired a gang to kidnap Seonwoo, offering a hefty $500 million for his life. Meanwhile, Sira was celebrating their victory with Seonwoo and pulled him out for grilled pork belly. As they ate and drank, their relationship grew closer. On the way home, their hands brushed, creating a shift in their emotions. However, their moment was interrupted when Seonwoo noticed a group of men in black blocking their path. He immediately urged Sira to go home, breaking the romantic atmosphere. Sira, puzzled by Seonwoo's sudden shift in behavior, turned around to see a group of men in black passing by. Realizing the danger, she understood that while Seonwoo was skilled, defeating armed men would be difficult. Using her superhuman vision, Sira saw that Seonwoo had been severely injured and was being dragged into a vehicle. She immediately chased after them while notifying Jinmo of their location to get help. Sira quietly climbed onto a barrel, peeking through the window to see Seonwoo tied up. The leader of the gang was calling the person behind the operation. When Taejun heard that Seonwoo had been seriously hurt, he realized they wanted more money. Unable to stay calm, Taejun's father grabbed the phone and instructed the gangsters to just teach Seonwoo a lesson, not to escalate things. However, the leader misunderstood and assumed that Taejun's father wanted Seonwoo dead. He ordered his men to place Seonwoo in a fish tank. Seonwoo, realizing the situation, quickly asked how much they were paid to kill him. The leader held up 5 fingers. Seonwoo, enraged, laughed bitterly, realizing that a group chairman like him was only worth $343,000. The leader began to question if he had been tricked. Seonwoo urged the gang to release him, promising $343 million to $100,000 in return. Just as the leader was about to order Seonwoo's removal from the fish tank, a loud explosion shook the place. Jinmo made a dramatic entrance, flanked by 2 girls. The gang members quickly shoved Seonwoo back into the water and sealed the tank. Jinmo, showcasing his martial arts skills with Nanaku, was joined by the 2 girls armed with smoke bombs, bows, and water guns. In the chaos, the trio completely forgot that rescuing Seonwoo should have been their priority. Meanwhile, trapped inside the fish tank, Seonwoo struggled to breathe. Luckily, Jinmo noticed just in time, quickly opened the lid, and pulled him out. Sira rushed over to help Seonwoo escape, while Jinmo and Nahi worked to clear a path behind them. Initially, they planned to lure the gangsters away, but to their surprise, the thugs ignored them and kept chasing Seonwoo. Already injured and gasping for air, Seonwoo was physically drained. Eventually, they were cornered. Seonwoo used every bit of strength he had left to fight off the first wave of attackers. He urged Sira to escape, warning that, if she stayed, they could both get caught. He led the remaining enemies to the edge of a cliff before slipping and vanishing without a trace. Just as the gang leader was about to send someone to search for him, the sound of a siren blared, forcing the gangsters to flee. After a night of relentless searching by Sira's group and the police, there was still no sign of Seonwoo. The next day, the news reported that Seonwoo, the chairman of Unkong Corporation, was missing. Sira remembered the last time she saw him, when he had protected her from the gangsters. Feeling restless, she decided she couldn't just sit back and do nothing. Sira returned to the forest where Seonwoo had disappeared, using her superhuman vision to search for clues. Suddenly, she spotted a red handprint on a tree. As she was about to look around more, the gangsters reappeared. Just when she didn't know what to do, a hand covered her mouth. It was Seonwoo, and he was still alive. That night, while Seonwoo was clinging to the cliff, he spotted Secretary Kim. He deduced that the person behind the thugs was the vice chairman, which prompted him to temporarily change his plans and go into hiding. He wanted to figure out their next move. Seonwoo then took Sira to a villa where his mother had lived before she passed away. Seeing him covered in wounds made Sira's heart ache, so she took the initiative to help him bandage up. As the gauze wrapped around his waist, the atmosphere between them grew increasingly romantic. Suddenly, Sira noticed a photograph on the table. Xianwu explained that it was a picture of his mother when she volunteered at an orphanage. Sira revealed that this was the same orphanage where she had lived as a child, and that Xianwu's mother had been the aunt she cherished dearly. As someone with superhuman eyesight, Sira was often bullied by other kids who called her a monster, but the aunt was always there to comfort, encourage, and love her. From that moment, Sira decided that she wanted to be someone special, someone who could act. She took Xianwu out to eat a variety of delicious dishes he had never tried before, and even bought him a cheap shirt he had never worn. They both wore simple floral shirts and sunglasses, creating a beautiful scene that even the old photographer couldn't resist capturing in many photos. Sira noticed this and quickly ran over to stop him. Xianwu, however, discovered many old photographs on the wall and thought he might find something useful. After complimenting the old man on his photography skills, the man beamed and showed Xianwu more pictures. To Xianwu's surprise, he made a major discovery. The vice chairman had been there 20 years ago, and the necklace that had vanished with his mother was also in his possession. This meant that the vice chairman could very well have been the one who murdered his mother. To find evidence, they first needed to locate the person in the photograph. Meanwhile, Sira was fast asleep when she suddenly felt uneasy and had another nightmare. This time, she dreamed of a green-eyed monster chasing her. When Xianwu saw the pained expression on her face, he rushed to comfort her, placing her head on his lap and holding her hand. Just like that, Sira finally fell into a peaceful sleep. The next morning, Sira woke up to find Xianwu still in the same position as the night before. She wondered if his limbs had gone numb. The atmosphere between them seemed to be subtly shifting. At that moment, Xianwu suddenly received a message from Jinmo, revealing that the company had called for an emergency shareholders meeting. It turned out that both Taijun and his father believed Xianwu was dead and had hurriedly scheduled the meeting, hoping to seize the leadership role under the pretense that the company lacked direction. Just as everyone raised their hands to vote, the vice chairman believed the position rightfully belonged to him. But then, the door slowly opened, and a handsome Xianwu, dressed in a white suit, walked in with his secretary. The room was shocked by this unexpected entrance, and the vice chairman's hopes were completely dashed. Xianwu was determined not to let the two conspirators get away with their actions. In the end, the vice chairman was forced to shift all the blame onto his son before leaving. As he stormed out, Taijun shouted that Secretary Kim had framed him. The vice chairman reflected on the entire situation, questioning whether he had raised a traitor. He secretly went to Secretary Kim's house, where he discovered that not only did Secretary Kim have evidence of Taijun's involvement in drug dealing, but also proof that Taijun had embezzled public funds. Upon seeing the photos next to the bed, the vice chairman recoiled in horror and quickly left. Secretary Kim was thorough, though, and that night, he noticed a few strands of strange hair on the bed sheet. After investigating the driver, he learned that the vice chairman had been there. He slowly opened the curtains to reveal numerous pictures of the vice chairman. The scene then shifted to Xianwu and Sira, who had grown closer after everything that had happened. They finally found the courage to express their feelings for each other. The next day, Secretary Hong handed Xianwu a piece of information. After looking into employment records from 20 years ago, Xianwu discovered that the man seen with the vice chairman in the photo had once been his driver, and now the man was living in a nearby village. Though they hadn't yet located the driver, they encountered a teacher who was desperately searching for a student. Sira eagerly used her superpowers and found the child hiding in a sandpit by the roadside. The little girl's mother had recently passed away, and the girl just wanted to find her mother. Sira gently comforted and hugged the child, offering solace to the poor soul. After a day of searching, they finally found the vice chairman's driver from 20 years ago. Xianwu showed the driver the photo and asked about the events from that time. But the driver revealed that he had Alzheimer's and couldn't remember anything. He then pushed them away. At that moment, the little girl Sira had been comforting ran over. It turned out that she was the driver's granddaughter, the one he cherished above all else. When the driver realized that the two people in front of him were his benefactors, he revealed that he and the vice chairman had once visited the orphanage together. The vice chairman had suddenly decided to sponsor a child named Nam Gil and send him abroad. Xianwu showed the driver a picture of his mother and the children from the orphanage to confirm his story. The driver glanced at the photo and recognized Nam Gil, But why would the vice chairman suddenly choose to sponsor a child he had never met? Jinmo used his hacking skills to search for any information related to Nam-gil, but there were no records of him returning to the country, as if he had vanished off the face of the earth. Xianwu and Sira decided to start their investigation at the orphanage. Returning to the orphanage, where she had lived for many years, Sira felt an overwhelming sense of familiarity. The former director had passed away, and the new director was unaware of past events. She suggested that Sira reach out to her close brother, Police Officer Guanqi. Feeling hopeful, Sira took a lunchbox and went to find him. She learned that Guanqi and Nam-gil had attended the same high school. They drove to the school, but the principal from that time had retired. Fortunately, the new principal knew a bit of information. When Xianwu mentioned wanting to sponsor a teaching building, the principal was excited. He shared that Nam-gil had been an exceptional student and had even done frog dissections without flinching, which made him believe Nam-gil would attend medical school. He later encountered Nam-gil again, but he had changed, even changing his name. This shocked Xianwu and Sira. Meanwhile, Jinmo had developed a facial prediction program to estimate what Nam-gil would look like after 20 years. He eagerly called Xianwu, but at that exact moment, the name was called aloud. It turned out to be Secretary Kim. Xianwu realized that Secretary Kim held the key to his mother's case and immediately set out to confront him. Secretary Kim admitted that he was Nam-gil, explaining that he had been sent abroad with the vice chairman's support and had become his loyal assistant. He claimed he did this out of gratitude, though Xianwu didn't believe him, sensing he was hiding the truth. The truth was, Secretary Kim had witnessed the vice chairman murder Xianwu's mother to prove his loyalty. He had even killed Xianwu's mother himself. At first, he believed that becoming useful would earn him the vice chairman's approval, but the vice chairman only kept him around to do his dirty work. Now, fearing Xianwu would continue his investigation, the vice chairman wanted Secretary Kim to confess and take the blame. Secretary Kim came to the painful realization that he had been used for 20 years and was nothing more than a servant to the vice chairman. The next day, he knelt before Xianwu, admitting he had seen the vice chairman murder Xianwu's mother. Though Xianwu had mentally prepared for this, he still couldn't accept that the man he trusted had been the one to kill his mother. He swore to make the vice chairman pay, and even Sira couldn't stop him. However, when Xianwu searched for the vice chairman, he found that the man had taken sleeping pills in an apparent suicide attempt, leaving behind a note confessing his crimes. Xianwu angrily confronted him, but the vice chairman was saved after emergency treatment. Something still felt off to Xianwu, though. Alongside the sleeping pills, there was a bottle of antihypertensive medication on the table. If the vice chairman truly wanted to die, why would he worry about his health? Xianwu asked Guanqi to investigate further, and they discovered that the vice chairman's blood contained the antihypertensive medication, indicating he had been murdered. Xianwu then tasked Guanqi with reopening the investigation into his mother's death. He also intentionally leaked information to Secretary Kim, sensing something was wrong. Xianwu instructed Secretary Hong to secretly gather a hair sample from Secretary Kim's office for DNA testing, leaving clues behind to provoke a reaction. Meanwhile, the group decided to go camping. Just as Xianwu received a call from Guanqi with new developments, a man dressed in black appeared, looking like a professional assassin. Xianwu, Jinmo, and Guanqi used their combat skills to fight the man off. Sira, using her superhuman vision, was about to rush to help when she saw Secretary Kim spying through a telescope. Their eyes met, and Sira was struck with a flash of childhood memories. It turned out she had witnessed Secretary Kim murder Xianwu's mother when she was young. Xianwu and Jinmo struggled to fend off the assassin, but luckily, Guanqi arrived just in time after hearing the alarm. Both the assassin and Secretary Kim quickly fled the scene. Once they calmed down, Sira shared all her memories with the group, expressing regret for not rushing to save Xianwu's mother. Due to her emotional distress, Sira was taken back to the secret base while the others rushed to Secretary Kim's house to catch him. However, when they arrived, they found the house empty with no trace of him. It turned out he had snuck into the secret base, planning to kill Sira and eliminate the last witness. He tried to strangle Sira, but she told him she had already revealed the truth, making his actions meaningless. He stopped and decided to kidnap her to use as leverage against Xianwu. Secretary Kim called Xianwu, demanding he come alone to a meeting point if he wanted to save Sira. Xianwu, with no other choice, agreed. However, when Xianwu arrived, there was no sign of Sira. Furious, he charged at Secretary Kim, but the moment he raised his fist, Secretary Kim revealed a remote with a red light and showed Seonwoo a picture of a bomb attached to Sira. He warned Seonwoo that any rash moves would result in Sira's death. Seonwoo froze, allowing Secretary Kim to strike him. Satisfied with his aggression, Secretary Kim then demanded Seonwoo kneel and beg him. As Seonwoo kneeled, Secretary Kim smiled in delight. Meanwhile, Sira, tied to a chair, used her super sight to find a way out. She tripped, causing the bomb's cap to fall off. Secretary Kim smugly recounted how he had murdered Seonwoo's mother. Unable to take it any longer, Seonwoo lost control and charged at him. Secretary Kim revealed that his actions were driven by jealousy over Seonwoo's happiness. Just as Seonwoo was about to strike again, Secretary Kim kicked him down and began choking him. Sira, now free from her restraints, grabbed a pan and struck Secretary Kim on the head. She had cut the ropes by rubbing them against the wall, using a mirror to disarm the bomb just in time. She rushed to save Seonwoo, and Secretary Kim was finally captured. Seonwoo and Sira embraced, relieved. After 20 years, Seonwoo had finally caught the real killer of his mother. Now, his life had meaning, and he had found a woman deserving of his love. He gave Sira a necklace, his most treasured possession, a gift from his mother. Sira was deeply touched. Seonwoo then took Sira to his parents' grave, proudly introducing her as his future wife. He confidently declared that they would be happy forever. After 20 years, Seonwoo finally had his first vacation. He and Sira lived happily ever after. The movie ends here. See you in the next one.